Hey there, unconventional conventionists. Thanks for tuning in to Time Warp Radio, the Rocky Horror Picture Show Movie by Minute podcast, where with each 7 minutes, bah, 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 we can make you a fur. I'm Haley Mervini.
And I'm Katie Tomini.
And we're your resident criminologists on all things Rocky Horror Picture Show. And we first wanted to thank the Star Wars Minute podcast and their originators, Pete the Retailer and Alex Robinson, for what a tank child, honestly.
Stop trying to make Tank Child happen.
I want it to be like, do you play an ex-delivery boy or do you play a tank child? You know? It really speaks to Rocky's mental maturity, I think. But thank you guys for such an awesome method for analyzing these films. And we're really excited to just get started today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're covering minute 0.0.0 through minute 6.51, which we'll be covering, those gorgeous, gorgeous lips. Some of those references that are made in our opening track science fiction double feature, as well as a taste at the real stuff that people come for, which is, the rest of the movie, not just the intro stuff. So we're gonna go through some of our favorite callbacks and get started. Let's just dive in.
So the first thing we open up to is that 20th Century Fox logo with that classic drum roll.
So I just want you to put yourself in 1975, okay? So Katie and I are walking through the movie theater, right? Like, we're gal pals. We just saw Jaws earlier in the summer, and we are fans of 20th Century Fox because the movies they've released up to this point were Young Frankenstein, French Connection 2, and The Four Musketeers, because everyone needed a sequel for those movies. And they loved Gene Wilder so much that they told him, hey, please write and direct a movie for us, and it'll last forever. So, that hit, Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother.
Oh yeah, that classic film.
But then they came out with Rocky Horror Picture Show in 1975.
Yep. And the next thing that we see on the screen is going to be in blood red letters, 20th Century Fox presents. So some other films that were released around that year, just to put us a little bit more in that headspace. We've got Jaws.
Which we'll get to why that was let's just say it broke some records. Yeah.
We've got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay.
The Return of the Pink Panther, because, everybody loves Pink Panther.
So just sequels galore.
Oh, yeah.
The present day isn't just littered with sequels. The 70s they were also littered with sequels.
And, I think 1975 was kind of a goofy year for cinema. Because we've also got Tommy, the pinball champion movie from The Who.
Oh my gosh.
We've got The Stepford Wives.
Okay, another classic.
We've got Dolomite.
Okay.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I wish we could shadowcast that.
That would be incredible. I would give...
With the coconut shells.
I would give
be behind
anything.
you, Katie. You'd have your backpack and I'd be behind you and I'd... Clap, 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 clap.
So it was just kind of like a funky movie year.
Yeah, those movies, I would put Rocky Horror Picture Show in that same category that year. And then The Academy Awards that year were considered a clean sweep, basically, for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They won Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Adapted Screenplay. So I just want to believe that there wasn't any room for Rocky Horror at the Academy Awards that year.
You know, it's not that it wasn't good, it's just there was no room. It was
Yeah,
it was
and-
all taken up by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Jaws.
And then Barry Lyndon, too. So it was like no room for anyone else. It was just those three movies dominating the categories.
And next up on the screen, we've got a Lou Adler, Michael White production.
So this movie opened in the UK on August 14th, 1975, and then premiered in the US at the Westwood Theater in Los Angeles on September 26th, 1975. So we just observed its birthday, and it's nuts to me because when the movie originally released, it failed in its test markets, and the executives at 20th Century Fox pulled it from a wide release.
It's just so crazy because it's so popular today, still,
Like
45
we're watching
years later.
the movie right now. And it got scrapped initially to some level.
So I wanted to go over figures a little bit, just because I think that stuff's interesting.
Yeah.
So the budget for
Put me
the
there.
film was about 1.4 million, which is just about 6.75 million today.
Okay.
And the box office, it came in at 1.75 million, which is about 8.4 million today. So it just broke even.
It's like they had enough for champagne afterward, but that was it. Like, and not the expensive champagne. It was like, guys, you get a bottle and you get a bottle, but then everybody else has to share another bottle. And comparatively to Jaws, it had a different production budget. It was a much larger production than the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It had a budget of $12 million, which still boggles my mind because, like, that doesn't sound like anything to produce a movie.
Yeah, not by today's standards.
No. And their box office was $470 million. And in today's money, that's $2.27 billion.
And that's totally insane.
That's 75, bruh.
Yeah. So that got us thinking, what could we compare that to for, like, let's say last year's movies? And we came up with Avengers Endgame because that was a huge blockbuster.
That was similarly like if you hadn't seen it yet, you were the same level of social pariah after opening weekend. It was like,
How have you not seen it yet?
you haven't seen Jaws? And then last year, fast forward to 2019, you haven't seen Avengers Endgame?
Yeah, one of my coworkers saw it 11 times in theaters.
Are they making a shadow cast out of Avengers Endgame? Oh my gosh.
So the budget for Avengers is insane to me. Like, I don't understand how you can even spend this much money. Their budget was $356 million.
They must have constructed spacecrafts to go to
Actual space.
and build actual sets in space.
It's totally crazy. I can't even imagine what you would spend that much money on. And their
But
box
what they
office...
make? Tell me what they make.
Yeah, their box office came in at $2.79 billion.
Billion.
So very comparative to Jaws and what the box office came in at. So that got us thinking, what would be last year's Rocky Horror?
And I suggested Cats. Because I've been suggesting to Katie that we watch Cats for the last, I don't know, since it came out. I didn't watch it of my own volition either. I was metaphorically duct taped to the couch and forced to watch it a la A Clockwork Orange style. But
I told
It's so
Haley
ridiculous.
that I would watch it once they release that rumored butthole version where all of the cats have CGI buttholes. That's the only version of the film that I will watch. Because I've seen about 5 minutes total, and I can't get on board specifically for the fact that they can't even choose what kind of feet that these people have. Do they have
No.
cat feet? Do they have people feet? Do they wear sneakers? Who knows? Because it changes all in like 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Well, tell me what the budget was for Cats.
We actually don't know what the budget was for Cats.
Oh.
Because I looked it up and it says between 80 and 100 million, which when you look at what the box office was, it makes a little bit more sense because I'm thinking that they burned all the receipts so that they didn't have to know how much they spent.
What was the box office?
$75.5 million.
So they basically heard the box office result. They were like, we don't keep track of money anymore here.
Yeah,
We
that's
don't
the
keep
only
track."
thing that I can think of as
And then they were
to-
like, if I had to guess, it's somewhere. I don't know where I could have put that $20 million. I don't know where I could have misplaced that. But it's somewhere in that range.
it just doesn't make any sense to
It's
me.
ridiculous. But who knows? If they're already doing Rowdy Cats, like maybe in 45 years, people will be dressing up in cat spandex leotards and doing levitating ballet on a shadow cast stage. Or, oh, no. Okay, you know what they would call it? Shadow cats.
I hate it.
But, Rocky Horror, it gets such a rap, People have they have opinions on it, good, bad, and ugly. But after 45 years of people putting on, theater houses putting on weekly or monthly viewings of this movie, they're adjusted for today's inflation. Their box office total has come to be $479 million worth of tickets.
And that's not bad.
That's a legacy.
That's really not bad, especially with a $1.6 million budget.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the return on that. And we do it for free. We do it for the love. We just
do.
want to like do it proud. Then blood red lips emerge from the void.
So these lips, these iconic lips, I want to talk a little bit about them. These lips that we see, these are Patricia Quinn's lips. And you know Patricia Quinn. She's our Magenta.
But she's not who's singing the song.
No, it's actually Richard O'Brien. So Richard O'Brien wrote this film. He wrote the stage show. So
And we know him as Riff Raff.
Yes, he's our Riff Raff.
Right. And that's nuts to me because I always have just thought of the lips as being the weird, disembodied, kind of feminine, kind of masculine. Like, there's no other features on the screen for me to make any kind of assumptions about who I'm getting this message from. But it is kind of interesting to think that I'm getting it both from Magenta and Riff Raff in some kind of like time warpy brainwave meld thing. I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of gender bendy, it's kind of androgynous, it's very cool, and it kind of reminds me of drag.
Because it's like what shadow casting players do is very close to lip syncing. It's kind of an extended lip syncing of sorts because you're playing along to not just the songs of the movie, you're also acting out all of the dialogue. And we'll get to that in just a few moments, but definitely it made us ask, like, how inspired is this of drag or by drag? And what do we find out?
So we found out that drag queens pretty much started lip syncing in the 60s. So they would bring their own records to the bar because they were so sick of the DJs and what they were playing. So they would find their favorite song and bring that record to the DJ, and they would have him play it so that they could lip sync along to it and dance to it. And a lot of the times, these drag queens were doing numbers by the Supremes because they were just so flawless. They had this choreography and these matching outfits, and they were just perfection. So these drag queens were really personifying what they saw in the Supremes.
And then we've definitely had drag performers of all different types. We've had drag queens, drag kings. It's a line that gets blurred at Rocky Horror a little bit. And what do those lips say?
So that's kind of the question. You know, we have this disembodied mouth, and she's almost forcing us to read her lips, which is telling us that we should really be paying attention to what the references are.
Yeah,
so now we're
think
going to dive
for sure.
into those references.
We've tried diving into these references, and it's like
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Like, Richard O'Brien is practically name dropping as many sci-fi references as he can get in one breath. And we just don't want to do it the disservice of, like, not getting the whole story across. But if you guys are interested in us watching these films, we would love to do it for our Patreon, maybe as extra content if we wanted to go through and watch, like, The Day the Earth Stood Still or King Kong, for example. So yeah, just let us know if that's something you might be interested in. But what we're going to try to do is interpret some meaning because the criminologist says that this doesn't have any meaning. So let's see if we can get some meaning out of this.
The lips sing.
Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still, but he told us where we stand.
And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Claude Rains was the invisible man.
Then something went wrong for Fay Wray and King Kong. They got caught in a celluloid jam.
Then, at a deadly pace, it came from outer space, and this is how the message ran.
Freeze those lips!
It's just so hard not to do the callbacks.
No, it's impossible. It's hard to talk through the lyrics because I just want to
Sing along.
sing along. These are such strange references, but what I could best glean from it is it's Richard O'Brien's Wizard of Oz fever dream, maybe?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there too. And they're definitely, after looking into these actors and these movies, like, they were significant for their time. They were, run-of-the-mill sci-fi movies as far as, like, budget and box office sums go.
But they're just kind of all over the place.
And you can tell they're Richard O'Brien's favorites. Like, he is such a sci-fi nerd, and I feel like he's trying to give us reason to watch his movie. Like, if I could interpret that these movies, the Day the Earth Stood Still, The Invisible Man, and King Kong, if those three movies were to get caught in a celluloid jam, well, okay, we thought celluloid jam had to have been some kind of, like, science fiction term. What is celluloid jam?
So celluloid jam is what happens when the film reels, like the actual film themselves, melts down and combine. So that's actually really telling in itself. That's telling us that he's taking all of these things and melting them in together.
I think he's literally putting, like, splicing the film reels together and saying if he could interpret a through line of those movies, this is how the message ran. The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Lips freeze and dissolve to black and white as cast credits are supered in blood red lettering.
So we would love to also highlight all of the folks that are getting flashed across the screen, this wonderful cast and crew that we idolize, but there's literally not enough time to. We are going to save it for full-on episodes that are deep diving into these characters, their motivations, their costumes, their Shadowcast stage directions. But speaking of Shadowcast, what would normally be happening right now?
So right now, we would have Trixie up on the stage. And Trixie is actually a creation that came from the stage production. So she's originally called the Usherette.
Okay.
And Pat Quinn was the original Usherette. So it makes sense that she's singing this song because the Usherette sings it in the stage production.
Interesting. Okay.
So Trixie is the opening act. And sometimes Trixie's a striptease. Sometimes it's just like
What
a
weird talent
performance.
can you do? Can
Yeah,
you
it could
juggle?
be a weird talent.
Can you walk on your hands? Sure, make it a Trixie. Sounds fun. But it's usually a good indicator of what the night is going to be like. She definitely can initiate energy that carries throughout the rest of the show. And I love a good Trixie. I love, like, if they want to go classic and do a typical burlesque striptease, there are definitely beats throughout the track that Trixie could do for reveals.
Yeah, it lends itself really well to a striptease. But I also love just the classic Usherette with the movie theater outfit and just kind of interacting with the audience and getting them hyped up.
Oh my gosh, how fun if she were, like, selling candy bars and stuff, like, during pre-show.
Yeah.
And, oh, how fun.
I've actually seen it. Well, Pat Quinn has this traditional Usherette outfit that is lovingly called Strawberry Time because she has one of the boxes that says Strawberry Time on it. And I've seen Trixie's do the Strawberry Time Usherette, and it is the cutest thing ever, and it's such homage to the stage production, and I just absolutely love it.
But the stage production isn't exactly where shadow casting got its footing.
No, so shadow casting
Is its own beast.
is totally its own beast. I mean,
Well, it was, okay, in Rocky history, in recap, it is currently shelved. Like, people haven't really seen it yet so far. So we can thank the young ad exec, Tim Deegan, at 20th Century Fox, who convinced the owners of the Waverly Theater to replace what they'd been currently screening as their midnight movie. And other midnight movies of that time were Jorodowski's El Topo and George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. We can also thank the manager at the Waverly at that time, Denise Borden, for just having her own tank child of an idea and thinking like, hey, these kids really love the soundtrack. I'm just gonna like play it for them before the movie starts, when after they buy their tickets and they come and they're waiting for the show to start. And people went wild. They loved it.
yeah, it kind of created the pre-show as we know it today. That party atmosphere, and it just kind of loosens everybody up. And lets them know that it's okay to yell at the screen and to boo the villain and to cheer for the heroes.
Yeah, it's definitely a party environment, and get comfortable with the folks around you, because you're going to be hearing them throughout the night. And also, like, you might be uncomfortable with some of the stuff that they show on screen later in the movie. And yeah, get loose, get warm. And that inevitably led to regulars at that time claiming the balcony front row as their row. And they started doing what was then called counterpoint dialogue with the film. And we now lovingly call them callbacks.
Callbacks. So one of the things that I love, a little snippet that I heard from one of Tim Curry's interviews, he was talking about when it became this phenomena. And he said that David Bowie and his first wife, Angie Bowie, were regulars and they would go all the time. And he remembers somebody telling him that Angie Bowie would just start screaming at the screen. So as far as Tim knows,
She was
Angie
an early
Bowie
adopter.
she was one of the first people to do it. And I just think that's such a funny little anecdote.
Yeah, it tells you that people were inspired to come up with their own ad-libbed responses or jokes, or sometimes my favorite callbacks are the setups to Easter egg reveals, like, especially for folks who aren't so familiar with the movie, when you kind of nod the hat to what Riff Raff may be setting up for a later reveal. Like, who doesn't love a good callback like that? That's so fun. And after they got tired of just hurling insults at the screen, they were like, I really want to make impact now, and started throwing props in the movie theater, which, like, I can feel all of the movie theater owners across the world right now just like
cringing.
They're like, no, not my seats, not the chairs, not rice in the chairs. No,
Well, they would throw it at the screen, which is insane because those screens are so expensive.
And we still do throw props. Importantly, we throw them up and back so that they do not damage the screens.
Or the performers.
Oh, absolutely not. And we'll get to the props that are currently in rotation for the Shadowcast we're a part of. Chaos at the Frida Cinema in Santa Ana, California.
So what I thought was really cool was in the spring of 1977, there was this chick who was so obsessed with the movie that she put together an entire costume for Frankenfurter. She wore it to the shows, and she was so obsessed that she cut and dyed her hair to look like Frankenfurter. And her name was Dory Hartley.
Her name was Dory Hartley.
Her name was Dory Hartley.
Her name was Dory Hartley. No, we can really thank her for, my favorite hobby, for sure. Other Shadowcasts have been formed for other movies entirely. And it all started from one fan obsessively watching the movie enough to recreate a costume and started showing up to screenings wearing it.
Yeah, it started Shadowcasts in LA, in San Francisco. The one in San Francisco was actually the one to do the entire movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just kind of fanned out all over the entire world.
Everywhere. So if you're curious about going for the first time, we will call you a virgin. We don't mean it derogatorily. We just mean that you've never experienced it for the first time with others. So we will mark your face with a V. We will scold you if you say that you're too much of a pansy to put a V on your face for one night at midnight.
But I'm sure you guys have heard of the virgin initiations or the virgin sacrifices, but don't be scared, really, seriously.
Yeah, they shouldn't be anything other than a harmless, fun way to kind of break the tension for everybody that so everyone can have a shared laugh before jumping into what might be uncomfortable. And like, who doesn't love good foreplay, you know?
It makes you want to come back.
Yeah.
So why would they make you scared if they didn't want you to come back?
No, and I think the best virgin initiations, we have an MC for a reason. Like, they should be in on the joke, and we should be, like, nothing the MC isn't comfortable doing, we shouldn't be asking our audience members to do. So, like, oh my gosh, I know I've told you this before because it's like one of my favorite pre-shows that I've ever seen. It was in Tacoma, Washington, Tacoma, Seattle, and I believe they're the Blue Mouseketeer cast. But their MC taught their virgins to do some ridiculous choreography to the Village People, I think. Like, it's just so ridiculous and fun, and it's something that everybody should be in on the joke. And if you want to see a really good example, we put one on the blog spot from last week's episode from a cast in Plainview, New York from almost 10 years ago. But it's still an excellent
representation.
Oh, yeah, and a good idea for anybody that's like, what could we do for a pre-show? That's a really fun one.
And another great resource / how-to guide on how to be a virgin would be on rockyhorror.com. That's a great resource for everything, honestly. Rockyhorror.com has anything you can imagine.
I would say that's where at least 75% of our brain's knowledge of Rocky Horror comes from that site.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it kind of tells you what to bring, what to expect, and just kind of how to have fun for your very first time.
So you don't walk in and immediately look around and say, what did my girlfriend get me into?
And I know we skipped the lyrics to the first chorus, but don't worry, we're going to cover them the second time it comes around.
So color in as lips animate and continue singing.
I knew Leo G. Carroll was over a barrel when Tarantula took to the hills.
And I really got hot when I saw Janet Scott fight a Triffid that spits poison and kills.
Dana Andrews said prunes, gave him the runes, and passing them used lots of skills.
But when worlds collide, said George Pal to his bride, I'm going to give you some terrible thrills. And then we see the lips get frozen into a dental x-ray of sorts.
Yes.
And this verse is definitely where Richard O'Brien starts jerking off his references in our face and is like, listen guys, these are the deep cuts. And he's like, I paid so much attention to all of these sci-fi movies that like I could predict things that were happening in the movie. Like, I'm pretty sure he's describing he broke the formula for like the trope methodology of a sci-fi film.
Yeah, because he does some like really obscure references, like Jeanette Scott. She's in the movie for like a hot second.
Yeah, she's, from what I can understand from the summary, she was basically a cameo part, but these are all sci-fi actors and actresses that Richard O'Brien was probably idolizing since he was a kid. And I think he's making a really good case for why he can write a sci-fi musical about it. Like, guys, I've been paying attention all this time. I think there's a secret message. I think he too thinks there's a secret message to come from sci-fi movies, that people should think critically and interpret those works of fiction.
Yeah, I think he's asking us to look deeper into this.
We also thought Terrible Thrills might have been a sci-fi reference, but we couldn't find anything. We did find an awesome shadowcast that's based out of Vineland, New Jersey, named Some Terrible Thrills. They're a monthly shadowcast that's obviously currently on hiatus, but if you want to follow them on Instagram, their handle is at STT_RHPS. And I am a sucker for a good shadowcast name.
Oh, yes.
I'm a sucker for them. When I go to a new town, that I haven't visited before, the first thing I look up is...
Rocky Horror casts around me.
Yes, exactly. I want to know if I can learn any callbacks to take home to my cast. I want to know what pre-show they're doing. So if any of you guys have shadow casts that are puns of any of the lines from the movie, please let us know. We'd love to give a shout out on our podcast and let folks know where they can find their community. Next time I'm in the area, I'd like to go see Some Terrible Thrills.
Yeah, you can send us an email or contact us on Instagram. We're super active on both, so please just let us know if you'd like a shout out. At this point, we are finally ready to cover the chorus.
Lips freeze and dissolve to black and white as technical, writing, and production credits are supered. So similarly to our cast of characters, there's so many people that we could profile from this crew, and I really want to know who's to blame for real.
Don't worry, we'll get into it.
We will get into it, but let's cover those references from this final chorus.
Science fiction double feature. Dr. X will build a creature.
See androids fighting Brad and Janet. Anne Francis stars in Forbidden Planet.
At the late night double feature picture show. I want to go to the late night double feature picture show by
One more
RKO. To the late night double feature picture show.
Where?
In the back row. To the late night double feature picture show.
So, I think we're right on the money. I think Richard O'Brien has summarized, hey, if you guys know these sci-fi movies that I'm telling you, hey, you have a lot of fun references to look forward to. We know Flash Gordon is a direct costume influence on Rocky.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Silver underwear, gold underwear. Wonder where he got that from.
And I love the Leo G. Carroll was literally fucked over a barrel when Tarantula took to the hills. They're talking about a 60-foot tarantula that has gotten loose, and the doctor who's been experimenting on it is seeing him go over the horizon toward town, toward civilization. And the references, I'm excited for us to watch the movies because I do know there is more to take out of these references. But at this point, I'm in Richard O'Brien's Willy Wonka insane boat to hell. I'm on the ride. I'm sold. You got me. I know you're the right guy to be telling me a story like this, and sounds like fun.
Yeah, so if you do want to hear us talk about those movies, and if you want us to watch those movies, don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon.
And the last two folks that are featured here, we've got Richard O'Brien and Jim Sharman.
And we really wanted to cover those two just very briefly because they're super important. So Richard O'Brien wrote the music, lyrics, and script all in one winter to occupy himself.
Was he in the Overlook Hotel?
I mean, basically, he was an actor, like a stage actor, but he was unemployed. So he was probably really, really bored at home one winter.
And just decided, like, I'm not getting cast in anything, and there's nothing being made that appeals to me, so I'm just going to make something for myself.
So he wanted to combine his love of early sci-fi, B-horror films, Steve Reeve movies, and 50s rock and roll.
I think if you looked at the iTunes, like, tags for the Rocky Horror Picture Show, those are it.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Totally.
So once he finished this script, he showed it to his friend and his former coworker, Jim Sharman, who was a stage director.
Okay.
And Jim Sharman fell in love, and he was like, we have to try this out.
Wow.
So he brought it to this little upstairs space at the Royal Court Theatre in Chelsea, London. It was only about 60 seats, but it was such a hit that they decided to move it across the street.
Could you imagine being in that first group of 60 people to ever see that show?
Right?
That's such a small
60 seats.
intimate show. Okay, and then it went across the street.
Yes, it went across the street to a 230 seat theater. So
People liked it.
people loved it.
Yeah, okay.
So once it was in that bigger theater, Lou Adler, who was...
I recognize that name. We just saw that name on screen.
We just saw that name.
Okay.
He was a producer of stage shows from LA. He went to London and he saw this show. Again, immediately fell in love and was like, yeah, I'm buying the rights to this and I'm taking it to LA with me.
Wow.
So it opened in the Roxy Theater. And I'm just so glad that when they decided to make the change from stage to screen, that they kept on the people who worked on it the most. So Sharman stayed on as director, Adler stayed on as producer, and Richard O'Brien is still involved in the production.
He adapted it himself.
Yeah.
He picked what was important to translate from the stage production, and then Jim Sharman had a very unique way of framing these shots to emulate what I imagine are like light changes of the stage, so that you see Janet's face at certain moments when you see that she's considering things, or when Brad looks like he's considering his sexuality.
I mean, honestly. But it was just a dream team.
Yes.
It was all the guys who knew exactly what they were doing and knew how to make it perfection.
So we can assume that everything else going forward is intentional, and suck it, Krim. It's got meaning, okay?
So the next thing we see is the lips dissolving into a cross.
Which is, like, that frame is very striking. You see not only the cross, and the callback at this moment is literally crucify the lips, because you see those lips at that center midpoint of the cross. And when we pull out, we see like bird shit all over it.
So we pan down on this spire and we end up seeing the front of the Denton Episcopalian Church. So you see...
Which is interesting. We see the signage, and that confirms that if Brad and Janet are not Episcopalian, they are very close friends with Ralph and Betty, who we're about to meet, who are getting married there. What was the Episcopalian Church like in 75?
I think it's a really interesting choice to pick the Episcopalian Church. I feel like it was really purposeful.
Right.
So they obviously wanted our heroes to be shown as, you know, wholesome, religious American kids because they went to church. But the Episcopalian Church was actually seen as really liberal in the 60s and 70s. They opposed the death penalty. They supported civil rights. They actually called for full legal equality for LGBT people. So they were religious, but they were also like very
They were open-minded.
very on the left side of things, let's say.
Well, it's a, like you said, it's a offshoot of Catholicism. So these are like the folks that probably felt like it was too strict of a religion. This is 6 years after the Stonewall riots in New York. So people were talking about homosexuality like as if it were something that either vilified you or was like a disability of sorts. So them at least observing Episcopalian puts them in that camp of people of like science-minded people.
Yeah, they were more on the we think that these are actual human being side of things. That was kind of the belief of the church. So I think by putting us here in the very beginning of the film,
we're about to see an opposition of two lifestyles.
Well, I think that they're also telling us to be open-minded by putting us here.
Okay. For like the events that are about to transpire, what we're about to see. Like we're just seeing a bunch of friendly folks and smiling faces to acclimate us. The young married couple, Ralph and Betty Hapschatt, appear, followed by a crowd of friends and well-wishers throwing confetti and shouting excitedly. Two photographers stand near the church in the lower right frame next to that signage. And these people look pretty familiar to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this movie a couple times, and I feel like I know those faces.
Oh, yeah. But it's wild because everyone is very conservatively dressed. Everyone looks prim, proper. This is the Sunday best that they're wearing. But they may be not exactly what we think they are.
Photographer, here they come. So these photographers are actually Perry Bedden and Henry Wolfe, who also play Transylvanians. So we weren't too far off there saying they look familiar.
So those two guys are Transylvanians, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. The photographer says, "The parents, the grandparents, yes, all the close family." He waves his hand, summoning the family together for a picture.
Ralph and Betty pose on the steps of the church among their family. They pose for the photograph.
So at this point in our shadow cast, we do have our Transylvanians posing as these wedding attendees. And ideally, I always tell my Transylvanians to be a really, really finely textured velvet background wallpaper.
You don't want to take the attention away, but you
No.
want to add to the ambiance.
Yes, and since Transylvanians usually have seen the movie a couple of times, I kind of like suggesting to the audience that there's more that meets the eye to these people that are attending this wedding. Let's go over them. They display their faces so clearly, so get a good look at them, folks.
So we've got in this photo, we're going to start on
The top left?
the top left and work our way counterclockwise.
Okay.
So with the big white bow on her head, that's Gay Brown.
Okay.
With
And
the
then-
sunglasses, we've got Anthony Milner.
Okay.
Older gentleman down in the bottom left, that is Hugh Cecil. And then over on the right side, bottom of the frame with the pink, that's Peggy Ledger.
Okay.
Right above her, fun hat lady, that is Fran Fullenwider.
But she's wearing sunglasses, and I'm noticing now that it's a very balanced shot. She and Anthony
Yeah.
are evenly wearing those sunglasses at the same time. Okay.
And those are
continue.
some pretty cool sunglasses, to be honest. And these people might all look familiar because they're all Transylvanians as well.
But the other... So, okay, then we got the guy with the wire glasses on the right, and then the woman next to him, the person next to her, and the other person behind the couple are not Transylvanians, which is interesting.
And
because...
I don't know whose kids those are.
No. Who? Okay. Literally, when we broke this down, we paused on this frame and I texted Katie, where the fuck have those kids been every time I've watched this movie? I've never noticed that there's a mini Ralph Hapshot and a mini Betty Monroe, almost identically posed, which might be commentary on young girls having expectations set for them that, you know, marriage is
The final frontier.
the final frontier. But it's also interesting that it's a mix of Transylvanian cast members and non-Transylvanian cast members because, okay, so in the original stage show, we had like an ensemble chorus, right? Mm-hmm. That was the Transylvanians. So, of course, the ensemble chorus would fill this role on stage. But for film, they could have cast anybody for these extras. It's very intentional that these 5 Transylvanians are in this wedding photo because there's 4 extras in that photo who are not Transylvanians. Like, what does it say about these Transylvanians' characters? What we might find out more when we find out who these Transylvanians are specifically. But there are other folks in that picture that I kind of recognize.
I mean, I definitely recognize some of them.
If you are pausing it at this point, it's like he sticks out like a sore thumb. That's tall Tim Curry in the background. But if you're not, it's like a blink and you miss it. And next to him on the left and right are Magenta in a wig and our author, Richard O'Brien. Riffraff. So why are they there? Like, why are they in this photo? Why are they... It looks like Frankenfurter is, well, I'm assuming it's Frankenfurter, is maybe the, like, pastor of this church? I don't know.
It makes me think even more, are these people double cast for convenience or for cost, or are they the same people that we see later?
I think we have evidence to support that they are the same people that we will be seeing later. But let's keep going.
Brad Majors, a young, slightly awkward, clean-cut American in his mid-20s, comes over to congratulate Ralph. Brad and Ralph shake hands. So something that I think is interesting is Brad and Janet weren't in the wedding photo, which was close friends and family.
Right.
So
specified. The photographer called for all of the close friends and family. They're markedly absent from that photo.
They're definitely not there. So that makes me come to believe that they know these people. They're friends, but they're not that close. So maybe more like acquaintances.
Okay. So Brad is not Ralph's best man.
No.
All this time we've thought Ralph was his best man. So Brad and Ralph walk down the front steps of the church. On stage, we would have our Brad performer come across and grab whoever is playing Ralph that night. Sometimes we like to grab some virgins from the audience to play Ralph and Betty. But our Brad will begin to talk to Ralph downstage so Janet and Betty can admire her engagement ring and her bouquet a little later. But in the film, we see the pastor of this church approach Riffraff and Magenta, and he may be talking to them in the background because he's definitely still there on the other side of Janet and Betty.
Yes, they're just hanging out in the background there. In the foreground, we've got Brad and Ralph talking.
But Ralph is like
gripping Brad's arm.
He's a very friendly friend. He's like that guy that you're like, I don't know how to tell him, but he keeps touching my arm every time we talk. That's Ralph. Ralph is that friend.
Brad, hey Ralph.
Well, I guess we really did it, huh?
And at this point, they like really awkwardly punch each other's arms. And Brad, the way he does it,
We call it an asshole fight.
And Brad, the way he does it, it makes it seem like he doesn't know how to interact with other people.
It's so uncomfortable. And like, we always write it off as these two guys, they don't really know how to converse. But this is the most awkward interaction we're going to see, I would say, between anybody in this movie for the rest of the film.
Yes.
So I do think that is some kind of commentary on how heterosexual men interact with each other. Like, well, the women aren't over here, or at least at the time. I'm not going to say presently that's how it is anymore. In 1975, the ladies are gabbing it up. They're having no problem.
And they're very close, and
Yes.
they're touching, and they seem to be very, friendly with each other. And yet Brad and Ralph are standing a good 3 feet away from each other and being very awkward.
And they're just, like, I don't know if I want to hug you or give you a hug, a high five or a handshake, but I'm just gonna punch your shoulder. It's so awkward.
Brad, I don't think there's any doubt about that. You and Betty have been almost inseparable since you met at Dr. Scott's refresher courses.
So we're not sure if they're talking about like a high school course or if a refresher course would be like after they graduated, before they entered college. That would be probably my guess, is that it's like they've known each other for the last 4 or 5 years. They've been away at college, and I think Brad is paying Ralph a compliment that, like, you guys seemed really into Dr. Scott's refresher course. Brad is remembering elements of their relationship better than Ralph is in this conversation. And Ralph responds, well, to tell you the truth, Brad, that was the only reason I showed up in the first place.
And I have a question about that.
Yes.
Is he saying that Betty's the only reason he showed up, or is he saying that Brad's the only reason he showed up? Because honestly, judging by his body language, I'm pretty sure Ralph is hitting on Brad. He walks him over by clutching his arm.
Yeah.
He's doing little punchies and little touchies to his arm, and he's talking like he's leaning into him. He seems really into Brad.
Yeah, very, I would use the word affectionate. It's like, these guys are, but Brad is markedly more uncomfortable with the interaction than Ralph is. I think Ralph is trying to like have a moment and is trying to talk to Brad. And Brad is so like, I don't know if this is him like trying to flirt with me. I don't know. Because I can just make a guess from my own faces that I make when cute girls try to flirt with me, and I'm like, is she flirting with me? Better give her a socker in the arm. So yeah, I definitely think there's a little bit there for that. Ralph says that Betty's the only reason that he went to class, which I don't know about you, but those folks did not become NASA engineers. Like the folks who went to school to like meet a match, they don't feel like, I feel like Ralph checked the checkbox when he met a suitable mate. There's no point in further pursuing education. There's no point in pursuing any other women either. We've been inseparable for the last 4 years. Brad looks confused by that. He like touches his glasses and is like, oh, what do you mean you weren't like totally turned on by Dr. Scott's lectures? 'Cause those were like great, man.
Betty, okay guys, this is it. Are you ready?
Hey, Brad, Betty's gonna throw her bouquet. And this is when everyone in the audience starts shouting, who's got the clap? Who's got the clap?
Betty the bride throws the bouquet. Janet catches it. She squeals with delight.
I've got it! And I love this shot because she catches the bouquet with her left hand and now it's in her right. So if I were performing Janet, I would catch it in my left hand and I would switch it over to my right hand as soon as that frame cuts. Because it's one of those that also you blink and you miss it. Is it a continuity error? Yes. But is it a fun add to a Shadowcast performance? Yes, I think so.
And I love this shot because Janet is like manic. Like her voice is cracking. She's jumping up and down and screeching about this bouquet.
Yes. Like we don't see Janet get to this level of mania even when she thinks that she's possibly alone in the mansion later. She's screaming that she caught the bouquet, which culturally, superstitiously, she believes that must mean she'll be the next one to get married. That's the pinnacle of female life. Do women only seek getting hitched so they don't have to work anymore? Like
Apparently in 1975 they did.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's changed.
The guests cheer.
So then Ralph asks Brad the question, "Hey, big fella, looks like it could be your turn next, eh?"
And Brad responds, "Who knows?" Which drives
What the fuck
me
do you mean, who
absolutely
knows, Brad?
nuts.
Do you see Susan Sarandon in front of you? Do you see that goddess in front of you?
And also, we find out in like, not in this chunk of 7 minutes, but you will find out very soon that he literally has the ring in his pocket.
Literally.
And she's this excited to know that she's going to get married next.
At the prospect of getting married. Like, he has no question now in his mind of how she would react to him asking her to marry him. It makes me sad because I want Brad to love Janet that much. But
he literally says, "Who knows?" when
like,
he
if
knows that he's going to ask her to marry him.
If he's reconsidering it that extensively, where he's teeter-tottering back and forth of whether or not he wants to go through with it, that maybe he has this ring on him all the time. Maybe he's like just waiting for the right moment to pop the question, and he keeps teeter-tottering back and forth forever and ever and ever and ever. So instead of responding to Brad, he kind of gets cut off. Ralph says, "So long, see ya, Brad." And their wedding car pulls into the scene. So let's look at this car.
So the car says, "Wait for tonight. She got hers, now he'll get his."
So it's like, yeah, there's the answer to our question. She got hers. She got the marriage.
Ring.
She got the ring. She's now, quote unquote, set. And now he's going to get what all males sign into marriage contracts for, which is the sexual element of the relationship at this time.
And so, keeping in mind what this car says, Ralph says to Betty, "We'd better get going now, Betty. Come on, hop in."
And Brad touches his glasses, touches his chin. He's still really thinking about it. He's considering what he's going to do.
As Betty is helped into the car by the chauffeur, the guests begin to chant,
Hapshat, hapshat, rah, rah, rah.
Hapshat, hapshat, rah, rah, rah. And you better get used to this chant because we're going to hear it later too.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for a second. It's the exact same chant as what we will be getting later with the name filled in the blank with someone else's name. And by the same people, the same guests are shouting the same rah-rah chant.
Yeah, so I mean, that's evidence number one. Why we think that these are literally the same people that are at this wedding and at the castle.
And Ralph just cannot stop saying goodbye to Brad. He goes, "See ya, Brad," as Brad walks across in front of the car. Ralph and Betty drive away. They look like they're stoked. He looks stoked. All of those, well, okay, some of those people look familiar, but there are other guests there too that I would say are not Transylvanians. Like I saw a tall guy there.
The tall guy in the pattern jacket, I have no idea who he is.
Yeah, so it's a mix. We're not just seeing a party attended entirely by Transylvanians. This could be like a group of people that have come to this wedding additionally, possibly.
So we pan past a notice board as we're following the car, and it says, "Be just and fear not." So this quote is actually a Shakespearean quote from Cardinal Wolsey. I'm not going to read it because I will just absolutely butcher it.
Look it up on YouTube. I'm sure there's like a great
It's
dramatic
also
Shakespearean reading.
It's also used in a poem by Henry Alford. So both of them have major themes about being truthful and honest, which I think is really ironic because both Brad and Janet seem to be hiding things from each other, and Brad is visibly fearful of like everything that's going on around him.
Yeah, it's so one of my favorite like behind the scenes stills from this chunk of movie, and we'll put it on our blogspot too and on our Instagram, is Tim Curry in his pastor wear next to this signage that says "Be just and fear not." So I like to believe that Frankenfurter intentionally he's giving Brad and Janet an opportunity to be open with each other about what marriage is and what marriage will be for them. He's saying be honest with each other, like tell each other where you're at. Brad, be open about your bisexuality. And Janet, like maybe you should see what your options are before committing to your high school sweetheart, college sweetheart boyfriend. But one of my favorite callbacks is when those two older Transylvanians, they're chasing the car and then they just get too tired. They're like, forget it. But the callback is, oh shit, we missed the bus.
The guests run after the car, waving and taking pictures. Janet and Brad linger outside the church. So does a strange family, an old man with a pitchfork and his wife and daughter.
We will definitely unpack this reference because this isn't the first time that you see these strange, like church hands, kind of. They're like maybe the workers at the church, or maybe they're the family that live at the farm near the church, something like that. But we've got Riff Raff on the right with a pitchfork and Magenta with hair that directly makes the reference to the painting American Gothic. The mother and father stand outside the church doors. Their daughter goes inside. The family and the minister and the guests all resemble characters we shall meet later at the Frankenfurter place. So there you have it, guys. Everybody there is meant to be there. We got a really great fan conspiracy theory about why these folks are here. But Brad waves a last wave, and with that ends our segment. Guys,
We made it.
we made it. Episode 1 is done. Be sure to follow us on all our social media so you can see our reference photos and get exclusive content.
We've got our Facebook, Time Warp Radio Podcast, our Instagram, @Time Warp Radio. If you have any burning questions, any comments, any stories you'd like to tell us, email us at timewarpradioPod@gmail.com. If you'd like to buy us a coffee, it's patreon.com/timewarpradio. And next week, we'll be covering a little thing called Damn It, Janet.
Damn it, Janet is right. And we'll also be beginning our character profiles with Barry Bostwick, our Brad. And I'm just so excited to keep discussing this movie. So we'll talk to you then.
And don't forget, On
Wednesdays, we watch Rocky.
Bye!
Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and we appreciate all your feedback. We'll see you next time.